All right, all right. Good morning, everyone. It is Monday morning, and you know what that means. It's time for another exciting episode of In Your Element with Ardis and Eric. My name is Eric Stoller, VP of Product Strategy for Element 451. As always, I'm joined by founder and CEO of Element 451, Ardis Kadiu. Ardis, how are you doing this morning?
Doing great, Eric. It's a great Monday morning.
I mean, come on, man. I'm like, I've got my second cup of coffee. I'm ready to go. I've got my super fancy Element mug, and it's application season. Move-in day, move-in weeks have been happening. It's like super exciting times in higher ed right now. We won't talk about the big C word. Hopefully, this episode, but this episode is entitled. It's about applications, right? Part of the sort of like foundational elements and aspects of Element 451 as a platform, as a technology, is obviously the ability for schools to run applications through our technology. And obviously we wanted to title this episode kind of as a good hook. And so apps, 3 must-haves. I'm assuming there's about 27 must-haves at minimum. But we're going to try to dive into at least 3 really sort of solid components that when you're thinking about your applications, putting it together, deploying it on the web, on mobile, on desktop, et cetera, things that you need to think about. And Ardis is going to lead the way with his fancy display technology. I believe you're going to make yourself tiny, and I'll go down to a little thumbnail here. But by the way, we're being live streamed on Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course, as usual, my dad's fax machine. So, Ardis, if you're still there, it looks like you froze. That's okay. Oh, there you go. You're back. You froze for just a second there, Ardis.
Yeah, I apologize for that. It seems that I'm having some internet issues here.
Technical difficulties. It's okay. I'm expecting my internet to kind of go off and on as well because there's been a lot of power outages where I'm at. And so you never know. So if I just disappear, that's what's happened. Just, fair word of warning for everyone watching the show. And it was probably my dad. This is him getting back at me for all the shots at his fax machine prowess. So anyway, this show, this show, the Monday show is really, it's a product showcase. Excuse me. It's a product showcase for us, right? This is about kind of, what is it that Element does really well? What do we provide for our clients and for prospective clients? If you're interested in looking at Element 451, this show is for you. And so this show in particular is all about applications. I'm just sort of spitballing a little bit here as Ardis loads up his equipment again and gets everything back fired up. But, we're going to talk about applications. So Ardis, let's sort of set the context here. When you think about college applications, what do you think of first?
Well, look, I guess we can go back to our videos, and then I'm going to jump into this application screen in just a second. So Victoria, if you can just get us back side to side, because I want to set the context a little bit as well. You think about the college applications, and number one thing is, well, how are the students going to access this application? And that student experience is top of mind. So is it going to be mobile, responsive? Are you able to capture all of the marketing data that you need out of your applications? So the number one thing that we're going to focus on today is about the experience of your application. Does it look and feel similar to your brand? Does it communicate that trust in your institution? Does it have all of the niceties about, guiding the student through the choices that they need to make? Does it have the right conditional logic and conditional sections driving that student through the choices in terms of picking the right program that they need to pick? So that is number one thing I would say today is super important in terms of having an application system that's communicating your brand, that is being aligned with a lot of the web work that's being done from your institution. And to be honest, that is the number one thing of why we started Element in the first place. It was really this history of me spending a lot of time at, when I worked on campus, worked on building websites, but I worked with the admissions office at NYU to make the student experience of moving from the website, where you have a lot of great information, to actually the application system. At the time, we were using, I believe it was Hobson's Connect or Apply Yourself rather. And, the experience was so broken. You went to the website, excellent experience, mobile, responsive, great graphics, and then you went to the application, and then you were transported back to just having this forms component. So it didn't.
It's like being transported back to like 1987. Like you're like on this super amazing experience, and then all of a sudden, why am I in a different look and feel, a totally different environment? And let's be honest, that's still the case for a lot of schools right now.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're using your SIS as an application portal. It doesn't mean if you're using one of our competitors. Still, that portal needs to feel and look and work very similar to your marketing. So I guess I can show. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can have my screen up here, and there we go. So here's an application portal, and Southeast Missouri, we like to use them quite a bit because they have a perfect marriage of marketing and processes. So they have a very complex application processing flow and interface, and they're using Element for all their campus communications, and they're using Element for all their campus programs. So they have hundreds of programs in there, and they have they're using it throughout their whole funnel. So the graduate, undergraduate, international, domestic,
online,
all kinds of students online, they're using the same application, right? And they've been able to manage that whole process through Element. But they're giving everybody a very easy interface to kind of jump in and start working in Element here. So what you see is a very, very nicely set up kind of front portal. It looks very similar to their brand. Their .edu is here as well. Starting an application becomes very easy in here. And as you start domestic application, one of the things that if you don't have an account, you're offered is this idea of how do you then go in and select and guide the student through. It's like, okay, do you want undergraduate, graduate, and then kind of first time and moving through the locations. So all of these fields in here are conditionally selected, right? So if I go back to undergraduate, it'll just, it would just pick certain programs or certain majors. So it becomes really, really easy to kind of manage the process of having only one application system in here. So the other thing that, is, let's say, how does that look like when I'm a student, right? So let's say I create that application, and then now having multiple applications be part of your system as well, it's super important as well, right? So here I am as logged in as a student. I can come in and I can kind of log in and take a look at, that application, particular one. You can see in real time, what am I missing, what I've received, the checklisting, the ability to pay that online, the documents there as well. And the other really important thing here is this ability to have, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, the must-have, right? That's kind of the. I
was going to say, don't give away the. I feel like you've already. I mean, the thing is, I love the fact that if I'm in progress with the application, it continuously saves it, and it's just like any other. I mean, here's the thing. And I like to think of this as sort of, if I'm coming at this from the student perspective, I'm accessing a variety of things on the web. And if I'm used to filling out applications that auto save my progress, why wouldn't I want that to be the experience when I'm working with a college or university application?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Eric. So I've, Victoria, if you can just change really quickly to my mobile view in here. So one of the things that I mentioned before was this idea of having the application be mobile and responsive, right? So here I am under the same application, and I can go in here. And one of the things that we do really, really well is this notion of mobile responsive application. So I can go in here, I can pick one of my prior applications that I had, the same one that you saw before, and I can now start that application. and I can see all of my progress in here. I can have different sections, all mobile responsive. And one of the cool things that we have is this notion of, hey, how can we condense all of the required fields into one section to make it even faster? So this idea of Snap App, now you can see that it condensed everything under one long section in here, so I can just fill in the required fields and be done with it. So that becomes super important in here. So I can access this from the web. I can access it from my phone. We see a lot of students filling their application from the phone, real-time updates, real-time as they leave. We save every single field in there. So it's all about the experience, right? It's all about how can we make that student experience the best, and how can we give them real-time updates, that percentages and everything that they're completing directly through here as well. So let's go back to to my full desktop view here. And one of the things that I'm going to show next is this notion of how do you communicate with that student. So now they're in your application, but what happens if they have a question? And the answer is not, always in your help sections, but it can be part of your, when we see over here, for example, we can have, anyway, so we can have all the questions in here, but what we see is that sometimes they might have a question. And what happens if we can't answer that question, or if they can't find the information? Then we would have a real-time chat directly in that conversation. So here it is. We have a real-time chat in the conversation. We can start, and we can do it on my mobile device, and I can kind of start communicating with that student through there, and it's a real-time communication. So it becomes really, really easy for that chat to come in and start communicating with that, with that student directly through chat, and answer any questions that they might have. Sorry for, I guess I'm rambling, but I get really excited about this because
the thing with applications is it's sort of like you want the experience for the student to be as seamless
Right.
as possible. But sort of when you're talking about the different pieces and how it all is constructed, there's a lot of things to think about. I mean, I think that's sort of the overall theme here is, you've got live chat, you've got saving progress, you've got, the ability to sort of prioritize questions that you really have to fill out no matter what. You've got the mobile aspect. I mean, when I still see
Exactly.
on institutional websites, when I still see things like, or you can fill out our PDF copy of the application. And I just think,
Exactly.
you're taking how many steps backwards as an institution
Exactly.
when you're doing that. And you can't afford, you look at the bigger picture, you can't afford to have drops in enrollment. And if a barrier to entry is your application process, that is probably one of the most ironic things, because the application process should be much more of an open doors, all encompassing, all embracing type of experience.
Exactly. So now we look at the application system, and we talked about conversations and kind of how that fits in. And of course, now you can, as we kind of take a look at that student from the, from the side of Element here, those conversations were real time, and you saw that coming in here as well. And maybe we want to switch back to, I guess we are looking at my screen right now, but that's that conversation, right? So folks, you can manage that during your conversations module in Element, but then you definitely want to have some kind of a real-time chat with your applicants as part of that. And if it's integrated with your application itself, so you know exactly who that student is and kind of what questions they're in, you want to have that be even more integrated that way. And the other thing is that you want to be able to help them out, so you can certainly log in as that student on that portal, right? And be able to help them out and see what they're seeing. So if you don't have that in your application, I would highly encourage, you try to fit that in as part of a requirements gathering for your next system, or perhaps take a look at your current vendor and see how that's working. Now,
that's a very polite way of saying check out Element 451, by the way. I'm always
yeah,
accused
sure.
of being the more like, British English sort of speaking one on the show, and I think that what you just said, if I sort of distill it down, is here's some core components for best practices when it comes to applications, and if your current vendor doesn't have that, you need to move on. I'm going to be a bit more blunt with that because again, people who have applied but maybe they haven't completed the application, they're in progress, they ask questions, they kind of came in and out. You better be in communication with them and having campaigns and workflows set up to sort of kind of do outreach and nudges and to continuously reach out to those folks so they can go from sort of, just being slightly interested to almost, finish their application to fully applied and fully deposited.
Exactly. Now, as we move on, the third part in there that we're going to talk about is this note. Well, actually, we did say we have a few more, but we talked about the student experience, mobile, responsive, real-time progress, field level saving, the ability for you to have multiple applications because students can change their mind and you don't want to lose history and tracking. And then having conversations, some kind of real-time conversation, some kind of real-time chat with that student so they can reach out to you and you can reach out to them, not just in the app, but also if they get out of the app, then you can reach out to them on messages. Now, the next thing is around marketing, right? So we're spending, everybody talks about students and this stealth applicant. And the student is visiting your website, is going then to fill in an application, and you don't have any history of that whatsoever. So you don't know where they're coming from, what the source is, and having the ability to capture that is super important because now you can tie the gap, you can close the gap between what you call stealth applicant and somebody who's been technically engaged with you and visiting your website for a while. So the third part in here, or I guess second or third, depending on how we look at it, is this notion of how do we look at that person's sources and how does your application work with marketing, with a modern marketing stack? How does it work with Google Tag Manager, for example? How does it work with Google Analytics? I bet you 100% of the schools right now are using Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager to manage their application, their kind of web analytics, right?
Right. The traffic patterns and flow.
Exactly. And then they're using Facebook and social media and digital media ads to drive people to those properties. But that connection is never done, right? So that connection between, where that student came in from and kind of capturing that campaign. So we can see in here in Element, we're capturing that automatically for you, that being through a web form or as part of the application itself. And we want to go a little bit further than that and say, look, every time that a person starts an application is completed, or an application is submitted, we want to let Google Tag Manager, we want to let that marketing stack know. So now you can target ads to those students for pushing them not just by email, but pushing them along with their decision process as well. So what we've done in Element is that we have incorporated and made Google Tag Manager a first-party kind of integration here, where somebody can come in and we're sending Google Tag Manager those applications start, completed, submitted events along with the application name, the program that person has started or completed or submitted, and a whole bunch of other things that we're sending those along. So now you can do very, very kind of targeted information as well to those students. The last part is around, the pixels, right? So how do you capture an anonymous user who's been traveling your website, who's been visiting your website, and then moving them now to to somebody who and they're filling your application? Well, we do what we call in Element, we're capturing anonymous user data, and then we're able to go back and stitch their information once they start an application or once they fill in a form or once they open up one of your email links. So that component being tied to your application system is like gold, right? Because now you don't have stealth applicants anymore.
Yep.
It's just, they visited your website. We have their anonymous data. Once they identify who they are based on filling in an application or starting an application or clicking on one of your email links, we know who they are and where they came from and how they got in there. And we can see all of their history on your website. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to be creepy about it. It's just that we know more information about that student and we can help them along, right? So removing frictions is all about, how do we get them along?
Yep.
So
I mean,
element.
one thing I'm just going to jump in real quick before you
Yep.
continue is I just keep thinking, if I have a small team, if if it's just a team of 2-3 people, let's say you're just doing like graduate admissions, for example, and you have a small team, this kind of technology lets you amplify your efforts. It lets you amplify your efforts to an extent that even a few years ago just wasn't possible. And nowadays it's kind of become, we talk about table stakes a lot. Like, this is basically the standard of what it should be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, we can kind of dive deeper into a lot of the other components on the back end part, but I wanted to focus today specifically on things around how do we, the student experience. How do we capture? How do we make that student experience as easy as possible? How do we communicate and how do we connect faster with that student? So you must have that communication channel embedded as part of the application, right? And then the last part, it's like, how do you make that work with marketing so that, that student visiting your site and kind of the marketing effort is all tied together, so there's no stealth applicants.
Right. They're not disparate things. They're connected together.
Exactly. So removing barriers, figuring out what those barriers are, making sure that marketing is aligned and kind of communicating and sending messages, like all of those things should be top of mind for you right now. And if you have an application that can't support Google Tag Manager, or they can't support pixels, or they can't support real-time communication, or that's not mobile, like, you should really, really start thinking about changing that experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I high five you virtually on that comment. Well, this, again, as always, these shows tend to go really quickly, rapid fire, sort of showcase of what Element 451 can do. So yeah, we've come to the conclusion of another exciting episode. We'll share some stuff out on social, of course, sort of a refresher about what we talked about today. But thank you again for everyone who's been watching another episode of In Your Element. We will be back on Wednesday with our Higher Ed News Roundup show. But as always, I'm Eric Stoller.
Ardis Kadiu.
We'll see you
Great
then.
seeing you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.